I suppose I owe you guys one, considering the last video was a devolution into my endless annoyance with the Star Wars general community and the idiocracy of just the shit we decide we want to harp on as a community. I'm not going to get into it again, obviously, but um, I will say I have talked to several people I know in real life. Um, Not that this isn't real life, but people I know personally. Excuse me, and they agree that this is not a real issue. It shouldn't be considered a real issue if you're talking about the racism or the homophobia. It's not a real issue. It's a fake issue. I don't know who is harping on this. I don't know who is joining either side to say don't go watch the movie because of black character or don't read the book because of gay character. I don't know who these people are because I'm not finding them anywhere. Um, I mean, if you dig deep enough, you find little snippets here and there, but whatever. That's the old video. Title of this video is probably going to give away what it is. We're going to be talking about, me, myself, and I are going to be talking about, the gray side, quote unquote, of the Force and gray Force users. Excuse me, I apologize. Um, I'm gonna come out and say it again because I believe I've said it before already, but I'm just gonna reiterate. I don't believe in the gray side of the Force. I don't believe necessarily in gray Force users, but I do. I think that you can be a gray Force user, but I don't think it exists in the way that people kind of think it exists at the moment, like the orthodox view of gray Jediism or gray Force users or gray side in general. And I'll give my reasons why in a second. But I mean, this whole argument that the gray side is somehow this utopian version of the Force, it really just annoys the hell out of me because it never seems to actually fucking work. Whenever a game or book or whatever tries to implement it, they always end up backtracking and going, okay, no, you have to either be light or dark. You can't just sit in this middle ground forever because it doesn't work in the way that people want to make it work. The way that the gray side works at the moment, this ideal of a utopian version of the Force is that you can somehow be a guy, right? You're a Force user, and you can kill people just willy-nilly, but you have a heart of gold and like you give back to like the poor and the disenfranchised, and therefore that makes you some sort of gray Force user. I mean, it not necessarily. I mean, but it's like you have a negative action and you counterbalance it with a positive action, and somehow that's going to equal out your presence in the Force. Which, if we're going by video game standards, yeah, that it does that. If we're going by reality or just reality in terms of Star Wars, doesn't necessarily mean anything. That just means the guy can kill people and still be nice. It doesn't necessarily mean he's a great guy. And this is the thing that really just annoys me. Like, especially even because the gray side got brought up once again recently in the Knights of the Fallen Empire DLC for the Old Republic. I haven't played it yet because I don't have the money to spare to get signed up for all that shit. I've talked to Bane about it. I haven't posted the video where we're talking about it. It's not going to be on my channel anyways. But the idea that these Zakul Knights guys use the gray side and somehow it's painful for them, and somehow I mean, this is kind of third-hand knowledge, I could be wrong, but the implication that it's painful but they're very unfocused, that makes more sense to me, that they're unfocused and not necessarily that they're in pain. I don't get where that comes from. And I mean, it just okay, here's a prime reason why I think the Star Wars community can get obsessed with the gray side, but then they realize it doesn't work. Way back in the Yuuzhan Vong era, the New Jedi Order series, Verguri, the Jedi, what's her species? Vosh, I think. The Jedi bird lady, I'm going to call her that, and I know I should know her species name, I don't remember. when she came back with the Yuuzhan Vong, because Vergery is a very weird character, because the Yuuzhan Vong essentially invaded the galaxy around the time Anakin was still a apprentice to Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan and Anakin and Vergery went to um, the planet that was being invaded by the Yuuzhan Vong, and it actually was Zonoma Sekot, or Sekot, Zonoma Sekot, however you want to pronounce that weird planet. It's essentially the planet that actually spawned from the Yuuzhan Vong homeworld. I don't know what that was trying to prove. Irony? I don't know. So the Vong invaded Zonoma Sekot. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Vergery were sent to go see what was going on. I don't know exactly what happened where Obi-Wan and Anakin, did they see the Vong? I don't remember. But Vergery meets the Vong, and they're fascinated by her ability to use the Force, and she's like a good Force alchemist or whatever, because she can like change the properties of like her tears and make them healing and whatnot, or even poisonous. And I believe she uses some Force techniques on the Vong. They react as Vong do, not very much, but they're so fascinated by her that she's like, all right, I will go with you willingly, and I don't know, necessarily teach them, or just kind of like show them what she can do and give them information about the wider galaxy if they don't invade at that time. They agree, and they take Vergery and they go back into the unknown regions, and a bunch of hoopla happens, including the Vong War Master at the time saying, maybe this galaxy's not such a good idea to invade because they will resist us, and then they kill him off and they put in charge the idiot who does end up invading later. But that's besides the point. Vergery was a champion of the notion of a gray side of the Force. I believe James Luceno was really big into this idea back in the day. I don't know if he's still harping on it. Because the NJO, New Jedi Order, has a lot of James Luceno tacked all over the place with other authors in between. And essentially, Vergery teaches like her weird idea on the Force. It's kind of light, kind of dark, not very one way or the other. She gives like wisdom to Luke. She trains a little bit like Jason, and Jason becomes Darth Caedus later. Caedus, whatever. And what happens is that Luke Skywalker tries to reform the new Jedi Order, along the lines of what Vergery kind of thought, and make it more of a gray Jedi Order where there was a little more leeway in exactly what was right, what was wrong. But then, like, next couple books, series, he repeals basically everything. And that's because the gray Jedi as this utopian ideal does not work. It simply doesn't. Because people seem to, like, fan fiction writers, authors of legitimate books, game creators, whatever, they have this, and like Revan especially, they have this silly notion that if someone just refuses to be forever good or forever bad and just go back and forth between the two, that makes them this oblique gray person who will be generally good, but they will commit evil acts to get things done. So essentially what the gray side of the Force, to me, is the that the ends justify the means. That's not necessarily, I don't see how that's a good message. I don't see how that can say, especially Revan as an example. I will kill millions of people to save the billions. It's like, if you are a total pragmatist and a total just utilitarian maybe, and you believe that, yeah, you can kill 1 million to save 1 billion and that will be fine with you, then yeah, okay, fine, the gray side of the Force will work for you. But that doesn't make you a good person. That just makes you a pragmatist. That doesn't make you a good person. A good person, a Jedi, will save the 1 million and the 1 billion. There might be a couple pragmatic Jedi, like, Saboeth before he became a clone and whatnot, who would say, kill the 1 million and save 1 billion, but he was going dark anyways. And to me, the gray side of the Force always seems like someone who's light, but they're tempted to go to the dark side, but they're not willing to commit themselves necessarily to going full dark. And that seems kind of pathetic to me, really. I don't see how it can work. like I said, I don't believe in the utopian ideal of the gray side of the Force or gray Force users. I believe in a more realistic gray side of the Force, like I just said, that's a little more openly kind of ambiguous as to the morality of the character who uses the gray side of the Force. Revan would be a good example if he wasn't continuously trying, especially his fanboys, to pretend that he is the ultimate version of good in the Star Wars galaxy, as if he's never done anything wrong, as if he's never been a bad guy, as if him doing evil things is a good thing. I mean, I just don't understand why people are so willing to defend Revan's actions, but then other people's actions within the Star Wars galaxy of equal measure are condemned immensely. Revan killed millions of people, apparently. Revan has, gone evil, like, twice now? Admittedly, one time his soul was split in half somehow. And just because he learned both the light and the dark side of the Force does not mean he is perpetually a gray Force user. In the Old Republic, when you go and face him on the Foundry as a Sith or bounty hunter or whoever, and you fight him, he has one line while you're fighting him. He goes something like, "I was a Jedi, then I was Sith, and then I was a Jedi once more." But then when you're actually fighting him, he goes, "I was Sith, but I am Jedi." That's him saying that in spite of his abilities in both the light and the dark side of the Force, he has chosen in that moment, in that time, while he's on the Foundry, to associate himself with the Jedi Order. That means that he I'm having bad tongue twisting time here. Generally, he chooses the light side of the Force, because the light side of the Force means that generally your actions, which the Force is, it affects you based on your actions outwardly towards the universe, towards the galaxy, because the Force binds everything. Your actions have consequences upon you if you're connected to the Force as strong as Revan or anyone else is. So, if you commit evil deeds, well, it's going to affect you. If you commit good deeds, then it's going to affect you. The idea for the Jedi, even George Lucas, where he got all the ideas from, is the Eastern religions of the world, is you have to commit good acts to purify yourself and to be good and receive good in kind. If you commit evil acts, well, then evil acts will just perpetuate themselves upon more and more people and come back round to you and affect you negatively, and you'll get your just desserts in the end. Being someone who goes around and kills somebody because they think that that's a good thing to do in the moment, but then later on they go on to save another person, and killing a man who, let's in this case say he was innocent. Killing an innocent because you thought he was guilty, but then saving someone else who was innocent because they are innocent, that does not cancel your action of killing an innocent. You've still committed an evil deed in the pursuit of a good and just end, but that means that you believe the ends justify the means. That is not a good action. That is a negative action. That is a evil action. Yeah, maybe you doing a good thing to possibly atone or do good to fight against the evil is a legitimate response, but you can't live in perpetuity in this kind of weird quasi-state of not committing to either good or evil. It doesn't work. The world, the galaxy, the universe of Star Wars, of reality, is full of lots of gray sort of moral choices of people all over the places, and if you look at any choice from a certain point of view, you can view the action as evil or good, and it depends on how you interpret the action based on who you are, where you are, what you think of the people who are doing the action. But there are certain general things people will do that are good, and certain general things people that will do that are evil. And even if you delude yourself into thinking the action is good or evil, and it's not, is the exact opposite, well, that's your own problem. You can't tell me killing 1 million people, no matter what reason, is a good thing to justify the means. It's this, I don't like to get political, I don't want to get political, but dropping two nuclear bombs on Japan to killing over 100,000 people to prevent an invasion that will kill possibly millions of people, tens or hundreds of thousands of people more on both sides of the conflict. You see, some people would say the ends justify the means. It's like dropping two nukes to stop the war. Okay, fine. Morally, that is very gray. I don't know. I'm not going to pick either side here. Um, and I see that's a morally gray action there. You can actually argue, okay, well, what would you have chosen? Would you have dropped the bombs and ended the war immediately, or would have you invaded and possibly led to even more deaths? Um, at the end of the day, you're going to get the same outcome. The war is going to end somehow, some way. It's just going to depend on how much more body count you want to have. Um, but you could look at that and say, no, the end didn't justify the means. We should have waited for more diplomacy. Or you should have said, no, the ends didn't justify the means. We should have just attacked in the normal manner of war and fought them like that and, caused much more bloodshed. It's a matter of your interpretation of the action. Having a gray Jedi, as you want to call them, because there's never a gray Sith, it's always gray Jedi. Having a gray Jedi run around murdering people, but then claiming it's all for the greater good, it all depends on your interpretation. If you don't like the person in general, or you don't like where they're coming from, or you think that the action they did is evil, well then, that they did an evil act in your mind. But the same thing could be said about the great... See, this is why it's so confusing. Because if you're a Sith, right? Imagine you're a Sith inside the Star Wars galaxy, and you see another Sith who you respect or whatever. He's like a Darth Maul type Sith Lord who's very nationalistic and leader material. And he goes and kills lots of Jedi and, saves an entire Sith army from being wiped out by Republic forces, right? Just imagine that. As a Sith, you would say that he committed a noble, good deed. As a Jedi, you would say he committed some sort of genocidal war crime. As a gray Force user, it doesn't. It's. What do you say? Do you say that he committed a good action or a bad action? It depends on your point of view. It's like the Anakin Skywalker argument. It's like, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. Well, that's your bias. I can't help you that that's your bias. It all depends on who you decide to associate yourself with. But the Grey Jedi, they don't associate with anybody. So, how do you determine if they actually are gray or not? They could be going around murdering millions of people and be as bad as any Sith Lord, but because you look at them from a certain point of view, they might appear good to you. I don't know. Usually Jedi and Sith, at least, they toe the line and know where the fuck they're going. A Jedi is not going to go around murdering millions of people because they think the ends justify the means. And if they do, well, guess what? They're not a Jedi anymore, and the Order decides to hunt them down and kill them. As a Sith, you generally are kind of given more freedom to do whatever the hell you want, but if you're seen as quote-unquote weak and saving people who are disenfranchised, weaker than you, slaves beneath you, well then the Sith kind of think you're not really a Sith, and they might try to kill you to take over what power base you have, or just eliminate you as a rival. So, the Sith and the Jedi more or less kind of stand in as a point of, are you on the side of good, or are you on the side of evil? There is, there's a line in, I believe, the Two Towers book, the Lord of the Rings Two Towers book, where Aragorn is talking to King Theoden, and essentially, or not, maybe Theoden, maybe it's Éomer, whatever. Dialogue is very much extended from the movies, obviously, and he essentially says that, at this point in time, when war is looming, you have to either pick if you're on the side of good or the side of evil. In this time, in this war, you can't perpetually stay in this state of gray where you appease one side and appeal to the other, because guess what? That doesn't work. Both sides are going to force you eventually to pick a side. At the end of the day, you will always be forced to pick a side. You could say, countries throughout history, they've been neutral. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying people within countries, politicians within countries, people themselves will always pick a side. Go to Switzerland in World War II. How many Swiss were for Nazi Germany? How many Swiss weren't? Those people pick sides. Their government just said, we're not getting involved in this. We're not going to do anything about this." And you know what? You could say that was for the better, whatever. I'm saying that the moral choice of the person, the individual, ultimately decides whether or not they're good or evil. It doesn't matter if you want to claim you're morally ambiguous, or that you are constantly in this ambiguous state. You're going to make good or evil actions, and it depends on your point of view and the point of view of the people who your actions affect. But like I said, there's a general idea of good and a general idea of evil. A Sith sometimes just run around and say, "Yeah, I'm evil, I don't care." Some Sith are delusional and think that they're doing good for the whole universe, murdering millions of people. I can't see that ever as being a good thing, but, if you somehow see it as a good thing, well, then I can't change your mind. That person is morally ambiguous, and there are people in this country who think Stalin was a great guy because he murdered, 30, 40, whatever million of his own people, but hey, he built schools and hospitals and shit. That makes him morally ambiguous, not to me, but to other people. So I can't define for you what the gray side is. Because if you even try to interpret the gray side from a reality point of view, it doesn't make any sense. Because it all boils down to someone's opinion on the person who did the action at hand. It's totally ambiguous. At least the Jedi and the Sith, when they choose to be Jedi or Sith, you know which moral position they're trying at least to make, which side they want to be part of. And that's why I like that quote from the Two Towers, because it's like, eventually you can't play this game of, "I'm not going to pick either side. I refuse to be good or evil. I'm going to be morally ambiguous." You achieve nothing. You help nothing. You do nothing. At the end of the day, that makes, if you're in that sort of situation, right, where you're morally ambiguous to the very end and you just don't do anything, then you've affected nothing, you've done nothing to help anybody, you have essentially alienated yourself, and you know what? People are still going to have an opinion about you. "Hey, you didn't come and help us when we needed you. You're evil. You can go fuck yourselves. We don't want you. We don't want to deal with you. Hey, you attacked us and helped your friend. We think you're evil. We don't like you. But hey, you helped us invade that country. We think you're the good guys. You're the great guys. You're awesome." And it's all point of view. So gray, light, dark, yeah, it's kind of all point of view, but at least with light and dark, there's a general idea of what position you want to take, what moral standpoint you want to have. Not this perpetual just nothing, this perpetual ambiguity. And like the Revenites in the Shadow of Revan DLC for the Old Republic. At least that one just had them where it's like straight up Sith were joining Revan and straight up Jedi were joining Revan, because at least that was more like, hey, if you can gather people who have darker intentions or use darker actions to fulfill their needs and whatever to get this common purpose with people who want to use good ways or have good intentions and good actions, and you all come together in common purpose, then that's a little more like gray, as a gray order than anything else I've seen, where it's like, get people who are darker in intent, darker in the will, and darker in how they deal with situations, and then people who are more good, more light, and all those types of things, get them to work towards a common purpose. That's more gray than just saying, here, give a bunch of people a yellow, ambiguous colored lightsaber and call them ambiguous in terms of what side of the Force you're using. And if we're talking about purely lore here for the Legends, the Force needs direction. Pure raw Force users, like if we're gonna go for like raw Force users, you have like Galen Marek or Starkiller. Yeah, he's powerful, but the idea of raw Force potential without direction just means you're a walking, talking time bomb who just unleashes these vast bouts of energy without any real it's undirected, it's unfocused, and that's why Sith Lords, when they're really deep in the dark side, they try to focus themselves because it directs the Force into channeling just the right thing that the Sith need for the Force, or the Jedi want to center themselves within the light because it helps empower them. How do you empower yourself as a gray Force user if we're going to accept this utopian idea of what the gray side is? Do you sit there and seethe in anger and then try to focus yourself at the same time? Does that put you into this sort of weird gray area? And if we're going to go by this idea that the gray side of the Force somehow makes you the strongest Force user in the playing field, then how do you explain, if we're going by legends here, how do you explain away oneness with the Force, where like 3 people or whatever throughout history have achieved such a state of like oneness with the Force in the light, where they were so in tune with the light side of the Force that they just literally became like a being of energy, and like who turned to a being of light? Was it like Jason, I think? And when he became one with the Force or whatever, he like literally just blew away the Vong because he became nigh powerful. Oneness with the Force was achieved through the light side, if we're going by Legends lore here. And there is a quasi kind of version of oneness with the dark side of the Force, apparently. I don't know if it's necessary, if I agree with it so much. Like, apparently Darth Malgus would go so nuts with the dark side that he becomes so focused and so one with just his focused desire to kill and maim his enemies that he just lose control, and his body was essentially just reacting, and he was like watching his body react, and it was just full on just crazy dark rage kill murder spree. I guess, but I don't necessarily believe that there is a real true oneness with the dark side, but you never know. How do you achieve oneness with the Force if you're in the state of not good, not evil, somewhere in between? People will point to Revan and say that he's somehow the standing golden boy of both light and dark. But I think what people are misinterpreting as a guy willing to use both light and dark power, for like Force powers, and somehow that means he's like this gray person. Okay, like some people, okay, if we're going to go by that argument that you can use Force lightning and choke people and like just throw your lightsaber, use Force pushes, that makes you this gray Jedi because you're using not only Jedi but Sith techniques. Well, Mace Windu crushed Grievous's chest, at least in the old Clone Wars cartoon, and he's not evil. He was willing to kill Palpatine, and he's not evil. His Vapad form is like on the teetering edges of the dark side of the Force because it focuses the person so deeply into battle that they might as well just be a Sith running around butchering people. But he wasn't evil. Again, maybe from your point of view, he was evil. I don't know. Luke Skywalker liked to use Force lightning sometimes. He didn't limit himself in that way. That didn't make him a gray Force user. That just meant that he was open to using lightning. Or even PL, little dude with big ears, but kind of more human looking with the scar. He was willing to use lightning. And he used lightning on I don't know if he necessarily used them on people so much as he did droids, but I'm pretty sure that at least he used it once or twice because he talked about how he's willing to use all aspects of the Force to get good done. But here's the thing. He didn't run around choking people just because he thought that it was going to be a good outcome. He went around using the Force as it was necessary to get a good action done with the intent of doing good. Excuse me. And he wasn't running around trying to pretend that he was morally ambiguous. If he did something that was bad and he recognized it later, I'm sure that he would feel awful about it. He wouldn't be this ambiguous kind of in-between asshole would be like, well, the end always justifies the means. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work for me. I'm sure there's going to be someone out there who's going to explain to me why the gray side of the Force works and why it's a legitimate thing. And you know what? If you believe in the gray side of the Force and you believe in gray orders that can actually work, fine. That's great. There are orders out there that kind of have these quasi, moral choices. But here's the thing. They have a set of guidelines. They're different knightly orders. But you could say at the end of the day, are the Jal Shay, were they good or were they evil? Generally, I guess they were good. Were the Gen Sarai generally good or evil? They're a little more ambiguous, but they didn't like the Sith too much, so, you could say, well, they're a little more light, but they're kind of hard to decipher, to be fair. you know, if you somehow want to argue what side of the Mandalorians are, generally the Mandalorians do evil shit all the time, but people love them and act like they're this honorific society that never does anything bad. And hey, if they butcher a couple billion or million Cathar to get the Jedi and the Republic all riled up, that's not a bad thing, is it? I mean, it's shit like that. It's repurposing people's actions to justify whether or not you think they're good or evil, or this weird kind of in between that I don't believe exists. I believe you have to at some point state what your stance is and where you stand on whose side. You know, if you don't want to pick a side, make your own side, but at least give yourself an idea of where the fuck you're going, and not in this perpetual state of do nothing, be morally ambiguous, and then at the end of the day, do something that's going to generally be good. Because Grey Jedi generally do light-sided shit while maybe throwing around Force lightning or choking people maybe once or twice, or not being afraid to kill like a Sith who's been captured and like a Jedi who'd want to take him in or something. But again, that's kind of just like a good guy who's willing to, like, you know, push the boundaries of what powers within the Force he can use. So yeah. I mean, damn, I've already been going on for 31 minutes. That's more or less what I have to say. I feel like I've repeated myself a couple times here, but I mean, at the end of the day, how do you explain the gray side of the Force? It's and you know, they tried with the Clone Wars with the whole father son daughter thing, where the father was just this continuously gray person who never chose one side or the other. But that doesn't do anything. That makes you more annoying than anything, because this perpetuity of not choosing a side, this perpetuity of not doing anything that benefits one side or the other, it's annoying. It's counterproductive. It's nothing. I mean, that's what it is. So yeah, that's my opinion on the gray side of the Force, on gray Force users. I kind of went out of bounds a little bit and kind of talked about how do you want to apply it to like real life or whatever. But that's the best way I can explain it, because to me, the gray side of the Force just doesn't work. If you think it works, if you think that there have been prime examples in the Star Wars Legends universe that show the gray side is a legitimate thing and you can be a straight up gray user and not pick a side ever, then go ahead and tell me about it and go ahead and believe in that. I don't. I don't think that at the end of the day it does anything for anyone anywhere except for you, to keep you on the benches and not have to pick a choice, because as, again, a Lord of the Rings quote from the books, everyone has the doom of choice, and the doom of choice is saying what that says, because if you look at the definition of doom, it's just kind of like, it's like, you know, a big event or something like that. The doom of choice, or a very powerful kind of action. The doom of choice fell upon Éomer or Théoden to Aragorn when he was saying the doom of choice is upon you, something like that. And essentially what he's saying is that at the end of the day, you will have to make a decision that will impact you and people you know around you, and you will have to live with that decision, but you, at the end of the day, have to choose, do you stand on this side or that side, and do you think yourself morally good or sound for doing that? At the end of the day, only you can decide what you want to do. Do you want to do something that's going to be considered good in your mind and good in the mind of others? Do you want to do something that's going to be good even if people look upon it as being an evil act? Or do you want to commit evil and play it off as good? Or do you want to commit evil and actually believe that it's a good act and, you know, be okay with your choice? You're never going to morally consider maybe it wasn't the right thing to do. That's the doom of choice. Everyone's going to have to make a choice at some point that they're not going to want to make. And that's why making choices in life is hard, because you don't know if the decision you're going to make is going to be the right one. And to me, the Grey Jedi kind of seem like this idea, this utopian idea of never ever having to account for any action they ever take, because they're like, well, I'm in perpetuity of never choosing a side. Fine, be in perpetuity and never do anything, anywhere, at any time. But don't claim to be morally superior then. Don't claim to be, you know, the good guys or the bad guys if you choose not to do anything when the doom of choice is upon you, as it falls upon everybody in reality and within fantasy or sci-fi or whatever. So that's my little spiel about the gray side of the force. I'm not angry, like, if you think I'm like going in a rant right now. I'm not angry. I'm just trying to explain my point of view here. My point of view, my opinion. Again, if you have prime examples of gray force users working or gray orders working within the Legends universe, go ahead and tell me about them. But I'm probably not going to change my mind based off what you give to me, because I just don't think at the end of the day you can perpetually be morally ambiguous. Like, they've tried it before within the universe, and they've always retconned themselves. And if they haven't, like with these cool guys, they're not going to last very long, obviously. Even with the beta where they were showing like Lana Beniko force choking the one Zakul Knight, she's like, you Zakul Knights, you never learn to focus yourself. And that's another thing lore wise. Being gray just means you are very unfocused. You're just a raw animal who knows how to use the force. You're not focusing on the light or the dark and the intense powers either side will give you if you choose either side. So that's that. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you think. Do you believe? Do you not believe in the gray side? Do you think that's possible? Do you think it's impossible? Tell me what you think. If you want to. If not, move on to the next video. Next video, I can guarantee, will be a Sith Lord rambling. I don't know who it's going to be about, though. But it will be a Sith Lord rambling. I'm thinking about it. So look for that. Until the next time, people. Peace.